Welcome everyone, and thank you for coming to the launch of Lithosphere Rising. I couldn't do a launch for my first novel, Lithosphere Rising, because it was published in 2021 and there were COVID restrictions. So I'm really happy to have you all here for this one. Before we start, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands where this book is set and where we are gathered today. I recognise their continuing connection to country that was never ceded and pay my respects to their elders past, present and future. Now some thank yous. Firstly, I'd like to thank Joanna for her encouragement, editing and for designing a beautiful book cover. Also, special thanks to Tash and Matt, who read an early draft of the book and provided some fantastic feedback. And finally, I'd like to thank all of you for your support, whether it's reading my books or listening to me when I ramble on about them. So thank you. All right, I wanted to start by reading the first part of the blurb from the back of the book. Alina is a teenage computer hacker with a burning vendetta against the world's biggest food corporation. She is hiding in Australia's Northern Territory, which along with much of the world in the year 2122 has become a vast desert. Owen helps his parents salvage scrap from the flooded coastline of Sydney, but he's just received a curious riddle from a dead scientist. So that's what it says, and this is the riddle, which is in the form of a poem, and this actually appears right at the end of my first novel, Lithosphere Rising. So this is the poem. There are regions of killing fields where the vegetation has been massacred. The charcoal of burnt logs, black crystallized coal dug up from the earth like black diamonds. The shadows normally under the plants have grown above, expanded and distorted. Shrubs are burnt cages, but from their bases a burst of green, purple or red grows, and down in the mud is the footprint of a giant bird with metre-long toes. So this is where the footprints, the giant footprints, come in, which are on the cover. You'll have to read the book to find out if they're real or imagined. Now, also on the cover is the title, Lithosphere Rising. And there's a definition of lithosphere, which is just before the first chapter. And this is it. Lithosphere, from the Greek words lithos, meaning stone, and sphera, meaning sphere, is the solid outermost layer of the earth. So as my first book, Lithosphere Rising, was about the effects of climate change on the ocean, Lithosphere Rising looks at its effects on land. Now I'm going to read some excerpts from the book from Alina's point of view, which are about the land. The scenery for the next few hours didn't improve her mood. It was mostly endless fields of trans soy, a high-yield transgenic soybean used in plant-based meats. The long straight rows of plants stretched to the horizon on both sides of the road. But as she travelled south, the land became drier. The frequency of barren, over-farmed fields steadily increased. Their dusty topsoil blowing into the sky created a brown haze. Alina noted many faded next food signs on these fields. They farmed them to death and then left them. It was afternoon and they were heading southwest now. Her mini screen said the temperature outside was 45 degrees. And she looked out on a desolate, bare landscape shimmering in the heat. She saw old abandoned farmhouses, their rusted corrugated iron roofs balancing on top of collapsed wooden frames. And by the side of the road were burnt out cars, like the metal carcasses of strange animals. One car body was draped around a tree trunk, like a melted clock from a surrealist painting. There were also what looked like parts of a washing machine growing out of the ground like alien flowers. Then the fracking drill site started. Every few hundred metres or so, she could see the rusting metal tower of an abandoned fracking site, and they seemed to go on forever. Fracking involved pumping a lot of high-pressure water and chemicals underground to crack the rocks and release fossil fuels such as oil and gas, which could then be collected. Fracking had contaminated many rivers in the Northern Territory and reduced the flow of others. In the far distance, beyond the fields of fracking towers, was the start of the Great Sandy Desert. It had been expanding and moving north steadily for the last century. Alina could see the dunes on the horizon, and she could almost feel them marching towards her, surrounding her. If this next food deal went through in the next 2 weeks, they would make the entire world into a desert. Thank you. So as you can see, the land in the story is heading in a dystopian direction, which is why the arrow behind me is pointing to dystopia. Now I want to read the second part of the book on the back of the book. As the world teeters on the edge of an ecological and political crisis, Alina and Owen discover an idea that might save the planet. But something is trying to stop them. Finding out who or what they are dealing with before the world is plunged into war and chaos will propel them into dangers and mysteries they cannot imagine. Drawing on solarpunk ideas, this is a story of struggle, hope, ingenuity and survival. Based on emerging science, it is an epic search for solutions, populated by fantastical creatures. So what is solarpunk that I mentioned there? It's actually a creative movement that started about 15 years ago and has many aspects. In literature, solarpunk is a hopeful genre of fiction that tries to imagine utopian societies where people, technology and nature exist together in harmony. Now, some may say that we already have the technology to create utopia, but the problem is we can't imagine or agree on how such a society would actually work. That's where solarpunk is very useful, as it helps us to think about and see in detail how different scenarios might play out. So this is why I've put utopia behind me. And it's symbolised by an abundance of life and life-giving water. And much of the story in Lithosphere Rising is about being mindful of the beautiful nature around us and finding ways to connect with that nature so that we can imagine our own utopias. Now I want to read some excerpts from the book, this time from Owen's point of view. And they are about this connection with nature. In the afternoon, they started to see large termite mounds, taller than a person, like short, stubby rockets covered with vertical fins. The air was filled with harsh cries, and they came upon a tree in the shape of a huge gnarled hand, with a white cockatoo sitting on each of its fingers. The forest was more open here, and the slanting orange light transformed the landscape. The sun on one side of the trees turned them into harlequins, with their trunks half dark and half light, but their branches the opposite colour to their trunks. "Hey, Alina," Owen said, "this spiky plant looks like it's made of red sparks. And see these new orange leaves. With the sun behind them, they look like a stained glass window." "It's beautiful," said Alina with a smile, but he couldn't tell if she was just being polite. The beauty of the place astounded him, and as the sun set, it created a spectacular effect on the grasses by the side of the track. Words came to him for the following haiku that he would later type into his mini-screen. For people who don't know, haiku are a Japanese form of poetry with just 3 lines, and it's basically 3 lines with 5 syllables, then 7 syllables, then 5 syllables. And it usually has a reference to nature. And this is the haiku that Owen wrote about the grasses by the side of the track. "Many tall grass plants, lit up by the setting sun, glow with purple fire." Now, Owen's on a quest for the nature that is left. And here's another passage which illustrates his connection to it. The birds were silent in the midday heat. His breathing was loud in his ears, and his footsteps hardly made a sound on the wooden path. The only other sound was the occasional breeze in the bushes. It was so quiet that he could hear each bush as he passed it. The gentle breeze rattled the leaves in different ways, giving each type of bush its own sound. It was like he entered a physical sound bubble around each plant. The bubble felt soft when the plant had long, spiky leaves gently rubbing, and it was more brittle when small leaves tinkled against each other like tiny bells. When he was a young kid, he would spend hours curled up on the couch watching nature documentaries from last century. He would fantasize about a beautiful world full of plants, animals, and sea creatures living in harmony with people. His one and only dream had been to travel to that amazing land and experience its wonders. So now we come back to Utopia, to this little hexagon, the top of the book. It's a picture of a waterfall surrounded by lush green forest. And one of the main themes of the book is how we can transform the land from a lifeless desert into a lush and thriving ecosystem. How do we change our course from dystopia to utopia? And how do we look after each other along the way? What mysteries await Alina and Owen? You'll have to read the book to find out. That's the end of the readings. Please enjoy the food and drink. Help yourself to tea and coffee over here. There's books here for sale at the discount price of $10 each. It's more than double that on Amazon. We take cash, credit cards and IOUs. I'm also happy to sign the books. And in keeping with the themes of the story, I'll be organising to plant a tree for every paperback sold. And for each review of the ebook or paperback that I receive. Now, you're probably wondering about the fishing net over here. So there's a little imagination exercise in Utopia that I'm hoping you'll participate in. So we have here some cardboard rolls, and we've got textures. So I'd like everyone to take a roll and a texter and write something on the roll that you'd like to see in your utopia. So something that you think would make the world a better place. Some examples could be renewable energy, electric vehicles, better aged care, zero waste, organic farming, being kind to animals, no war, mindfulness, a cure for cancer, affordable housing, sleeping in every day, whatever you like. So you can also illustrate or decorate your roll if you like. Use more textures if you want. And this is one that I've prepared earlier, which says more trees, fitting in with the theme, my t-shirt. Once you're finished, just drop it in the net here. And we'll see if we can get to Utopia.
Very good.
Now we understand.
Very good.
Okay, and after that we'll actually do something else with the rolls, but I'll leave that as a surprise and I'll talk about that later.
Okay.
Okay, thanks again all for coming.
And they have lots of visitors, like from Melbourne, whatever. Then there's a, yeah, they have visitors from these mountains. Melbourne comes to Auckland, and they'll have like 20 people come over all the time. And so that makes sense. You know, to be but then like my brothers, one
Here you go.
Short while in Asia.
There you go. Beautiful.
And so I had some experience with that.
Oh, I got to choose a seed.
Just like working on
That's not enough.
stuff was falling.
We were in Switzerland last year.
Yeah, that's good. Yes? Yeah. So, there you go. I think I might put some carrot in. I think I might have more than one there.
First time I saw those, I thought, oh.
Do you want me to hold your roll?
I can't drink long.
Going up behind.
Stop places.
Yes, it was very flat.
Great.
This is what I wanted, sharing kindness. How about that? Is that enough?
No,